Hello, everybody. This is Gary. Today is December 31st, 2019. It is 12:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States. I'd like to say Happy New Year to everybody. Tonight is the new year of 2020. And, sorry, I got food on my mouth. Happy New Year to everybody. And in this video, I wanted to talk about why I'm an atheist and why I believe religion is dangerous to the mentally ill, and how I reconcile my atheism with the fact that I practice Buddhism. Um, I was raised Catholic, and for many years I believed everything the Catholic Church taught, especially as a child. Um, I believed in the sacraments, in hell, even though as a young child it bothered me that God would allow um, people to burn in hell for all eternity when He's supposed to be a merciful God. It would take many years before that same thought led to my atheism. Um, Once I left the Catholic Church, I got involved in even more conservative, fundamentalist, born again Christianity. And I believed that I was saved because I believed in Jesus Christ and that Satan was real and all of these things. And in the backdrop of all this, I was developing a mental illness from early childhood through my teen years. By the time I was 19 or 20, I was full blown mentally ill. I think it goes back much farther than my teenage years. But be that as it may, I became certainly mentally ill by the time I was 21. And I went in the treatment. I was placed in several group homes, several independent living apartment programs with staff, and a case manager. And eventually I got well enough where I went off to college. Um, I didn't become an atheist until very recently, within the past 10 years. Um, the reason was I was listening to atheists on YouTube. It sounded very convincing, especially the so called four horsemen of new atheism: Sam Harris, who's a neuroscientist and a philosopher and an atheist, um, Christopher Hitchens, who died, I believe, in 2012 from cancer. He was a journalist and a writer, um, and Richard Dawkins, who is a evolutionary biologist, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe the fourth one was Daryl Dennett. I think that's what his name was. Um, but they were the four horsemen of New Atheism, and particularly Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris sounded very convincing to me as I listened more and more to what they had to say. The other thing was I didn't get involved in knowing about Christopher Hitchens until after he died. I had never even heard his name before. Um, but then I heard about the book that he wrote called, um, I believe it's How Religion Poisons Everything. And it was a very anti religious book. I never actually read it, but his arguments on YouTube based on that book were very convincing. Um, and it would probably be a good book for me to read, even though I'm already an atheist. I believe it was called The God Delusion: How Religion Poisons Everything. Um, and of course, Sam Harris wrote some books, including Letter to a Christian Nation. Um, uh, as time went on, I started to be more and more convinced that if I couldn't physically see or experience through the five senses something like God, then there was no proof that He existed, and therefore it made no sense to continue to follow any religious belief in God, whether that was Christian, Catholic, Hindu, uh, even Buddhism. Um, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Um, so I didn't have any personal experiences with seeing Jesus Christ walk on water or turn water into wine or to heal the sick. That never physically occurred in front of me, and that helped destroy my faith in religion and, in particular, Christianity. Um, so I became an atheist based on the argument that believing in God is believing in something magical that isn't real, it's a fantasy. Um, and part of the problem with mental illness is that there's often religious delusions. Um, for example, if I was delusional, I thought Satan was possessing me and taking control of my life. And then I went to a fundamentalist Christian church, and they would tell me, in fact, that Satan is indeed possessing me. That only reinforces the delusion and reinforces the delusions of the religious people espousing it. Um, so, to me, mental illness is extremely dangerous to the mentally ill who are psychotic. It reinforces delusional beliefs and dangerous beliefs. And for me to be an atheist is the best way to safeguard against myself against religious delusions. Well, that doesn't mean I don't have moments where I think these things are real, because I do. That's why I take medication. But for the most part, I'm able to separate the fantasy of religion from my religious delusions and my religious delusions from what reality actually is. Um, but to throw myself into a Christian church or a Catholic church or a Muslim mosque or a Jewish synagogue, that would all just reinforce religious delusion, magical thinking, they call it in psychology. Um, so I think religion is an extremely dangerous thing to the mentally ill. And my argument for the mentally ill who are clear minded enough to do it, they should become atheists. Um, of course, there are people who are very, very psychotic who can't think in any straight way whatsoever, even on medication. Um, so, and I believe that religious people prey on them, that those who are delusional and psychotic, and make them give money to the church. They control their personal behavior, taking advantage of the person's mental illness by harming them in some fashion to gain money, to gain influence, to gain power. All religions do that. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of people out there argue, well, those communist atheists, those socialist atheists, they killed millions upon millions of people in the past 119 years. Just look at Mao Zedong or Joseph Stalin or um, Fidel Castro or Pol Pot, um, Joseph Stalin, and they killed millions of people, which is certainly true. Atheistic communists killed tens of millions of people within the 20th century. But I could sit here and go through a list of how religion of all kind has murdered and killed millions of people over the past 8,000 years. But that's an extra long video, which I really don't want to do right now. But that's my answer. And I'm not a communist, anyways. I consider myself very much to be a capitalist in every sense of the word, as it's being practiced in the United States, with a social safety net for people who are disabled or ill. So I'm a practicing Buddhist. In Buddhism, there is no creator God. There's no God that created everything and started everything, and therefore you're not worshiping a creator God in Buddhism. Now, in Buddhism, I reject all the supernatural elements of Buddhism: reincarnation, karma, spirits, demons, heaven, hell, because all of these things are in traditional Buddhism, and I reject all of the life after death in the form of reincarnation, whether it's as a human being or something else. Um, but there are elements of Buddhism which are, to me, a pure form of psychology, and that's when I'm practicing Buddhism, meditation, learning to concentrate, be aware of one's environment without judging it. All this is called mindfulness, and it's a very effective part of Buddhism that helps me control my anxiety, my delusions, how to cope with my hallucinations, and just to be just exist and experience things without judging my experiences as either bad or good. Just becoming aware of your environment and aware of reality. That's the part of Buddhism that I practice. It's a form of psychology. It's a form of helping me to deal with my psychiatric issues and my mental illness. Of course, nothing like Buddhism can never replace my actual medications. I'm not saying that. I would not be practicing Buddhist if I was off my medications because I would be so delusional that I won't be thinking straight about anything. Um, so I'm not advocating any religion, including Buddhism, as being a replacement for proper psychiatric treatment when you're mentally ill, whether that's depression, psychosis, anxiety, personality disorders, um, anxiety disorders, and mood disorders. Um, so my practice of Buddhism is just of a practical nature. If I come across a Buddhist monk who starts speaking about angels living in the trees of Thailand in the forest, and some Buddhist monks will actually believe these things, or that some monks have reached the point where they have magical powers, they can fly, they can levitate. Those are the things that I reject. I reject life after death, reincarnation, and all of that. I don't believe the Dalai Lama is a reincarnation of anything. Is he a wise man? Yes. Does he have a lot of good things to say about the human mind? Yes. But I reject all the magical, supernatural stuff. Um, so for me, Buddhism is just a way of concentrating my thoughts on any given moment onto one thing, and instead of having my mind wander all over the place, which tends to happen in psychosis. Um, Learning to concentrate is important. Um, so I guess that's all I really had to say about explaining why I'm both an atheist and a Buddhist, and why I think religion in general is dangerous to mental health and mentally ill. And even Buddhism can be dangerous to the mentally ill. I've heard of people going on meditation retreats in India where Buddhism started, and the term retreat is misleading because a lot of those meditation retreats are extremely rigorous and tough psychologically. And I've heard of people committing suicide or having other psychiatric problems during and after those retreats where you're expected to be silent, get very little sleep, eat very little food, meditate for hours on end in a very uncomfortable position, sleeping in a very uncomfortable position on the floor with a mat that's like maybe made out of bamboo and it's like half an inch thick on it. You're lying on the floor. Um, those things are dangerous to the mentally ill. If they're depressed, anxious, psychotic, those kind of retreats are not for the faint of heart. Um, so that's the kind of Buddhism I reject. I just reject it completely. It's dangerous to the mentally ill, and that's about it. So that's all I have to say. If anybody has any ideas they want me to do on a video, let me know in the comment section. If anybody has any questions, leave those in the comment section, and subscribe, like, and share, and comment. Happy New Year to everybody. It's almost that time.